Stage 3 for the London Spitfire has not been kind. With a 1-3 record, many fans and pundits alike have been left scratching their heads. Fingers have been pointed at one of the most targeted individuals has been Birdring. Let's jump into a few clips that highlights the issues that Birdring has had with the team and why it actually might be more of a systemic problem, more so than an individualistic one. So before we jump into any of the examples I want to kind of show you guys, let's take a look at the game state. We see London with 2 points, a minute 51 on the clock, and we see Houston with no points and a minute 23 on the clock. Houston's struggling to get this dive in. They're struggling to puncture through their point. They're struggling to capture this kind of center ground that London set up on, and the kind of metaphor Anubis A is actually kind of pivoted towards is this center control rather than putting the Orisa and the Widow up here. Now what's going to happen is that Linkser is going to jump up here, abuse this massive sightline onto the point. It's beautiful, it's amazing sightline, but what ends up happening is if you look very closely, Birdring's right here, he's going to dash over, he's going to pressure the Widowmaker, and he's going to kind of take a duel, which kind of hints towards a little bit more of aggressive side. He wants to, they're uncomfortable with putting him specifically on the Widowmaker or any kind of hit scan, and we do know Birdring. He is a Tracer specialist. He's played Tracer for a majority of his career on Kongdu Panthera, on Kongdu Uncia for that matter, and he is very good at it. But it kind of hints towards this kind of a aggressive playstyle, aggressive tendencies, where they're trying to make this roster work with what they have, because it is kind of they're kind of struggling. It's strange to say that the Kongdu Panthera and GC Busan, the two of the better teams coming out of the Apex era, are kind of struggling. Now again, Widowmaker up, and immediately, like a stick in the mud, Birdring's there and dumpsters Linkser. Which, it's not really his fault. It's a tough duel to take. But what's even more interesting is that if Birdring dies there's not a lot of resources that London can invest into dealing with Linkser. So if Linkser does just get a random body shot, you're now investing multiple blinks, you're investing recall as well, which puts you at a severe disadvantage because you're not going to be able to recontest immediately after your recall. So it even gives Widowmaker quite a bit of time to pressure from this high ground. Again, you see this high ground abused a lot in basically every match. It is strange that we did see that Houston didn't start off with it, but we have seen teams go with more of a traditional dive style to kind of circumvent this defense here and this defense up here. They don't really want to deal with it, so they just completely rotate around, wait for cooldowns, and then attack. Just a hardcore dive, high tempo, high energy, all that good stuff. Now, as this fight plays out, you'll notice that Houston has invested pretty much everything they had. This is where they want to defend. They want to pick their fight here. This is their hill they want to die on, and they invest everything. Primal Rage, Sound Barrier, Coalescence, Diva. It's all out on the table, and they can't get anything done. But they do get Muma behind enemy lines. He actually is hidden. London has no idea. And what ends up happening is that Birdring kind of takes it upon himself, or that there was a call. It's kind of hard to say. But he kind of goes aggressive in a sense that he kind of positions offsides. Like if we think of this like an American football scenario, right? This is kind of the line of scrimmage. You don't really get to pass this line. And what ends up happening is Birdring actually kind of crosses this line and peeks these windows right here, which are kind of dangerous, especially when the enemy team's running a Widowmaker. He peeks that because if London can find Muma, that's going to take another 10, 15 seconds, maybe even 20 seconds, depending on how long he actually lives for, and it's going to milk the time away. They're going to have to either take a 5v6 engagement, or they're going to have this kind of odd blitz scenario where they have to push through kind of contested positions, and it's going to put them out of position. It's not going to be very good. But again, Birdring kind of goes off sides here. He's so close to almost finding Muma, goes off sides, pressures this area, and dies, which opens up the point massively for Houston. They then take the 5v6. The monkey's completely safe on the back end, sets up the dive really well, and they just blow open this point. It's actually disgusting at how this kind of series of events, the body block, the double headshot from Linkser, it all kind of stems from Birdring, because Birdring, again, if we think about the first fight that they took, he is the only resource that they can kind of invest into dealing with Linkser. So without him, Linkser just kind of gets to free reign and free cast on this point. Before we jump into this clip, let's just run down a quick positional and compositional check. Philly is running very standard stuff, boosted double-pocketed Widow with the option for Junkrat, and London is running Dive. Dive is great for this map because you can circumvent the defense. Philadelphia has chosen not to hold the center area that a lot of teams are actually choosing to do now in stage 3, but they're actually holding the kind of very standard, very textbook position of this high ground with the Orisa to kind of all in on this Widowmaker. And what she's going to want to do is that when the dive approaches, she kind of creates as much space away from the dive and her as possible. So she's actually going to come towards the camera and to the opposite side of the high ground, kind of splitting the map again. And what London is going to do is they're actually going to run Birdring on a solo flank and force him in a duel against Carpe. And if he wins, great. London can freely attack the point, and they don't really have to worry about Widowmaker, which is a giant threat in this composition. But if Philadelphia actually wins the duel, if Carpe wins the duel against Birdring, they have no other options, especially with the way that they position. They're running a 5-1, or a 1-5, however you want to look at that. Left side, just Tracer. Everybody else is running on the right side. And there's no possible way that they're going to want to dive from this mega area all the way over to where the Widowmaker is. So it's imperative that Birdring has to win the duel against Carpe. And if he doesn't, the fight's lost and they have to reset. Now what ends up happening is that Birdring actually kind of, I would say in my 2 cents, I think he mispositions here. This is a very aggressive angle to hold. It's kind of sneaky, it's cheeky. You're kind of playing on the fact that Carpe really shouldn't necessarily check this early for this spot. But he ends up doing it. I think that Birdring could be, you know, behind this wall or maybe positioning on the stairs here. But I think this angle puts him, you know, it forces the fight a little too early if he does decide to peek there. It is unlucky, but it does kind of highlight the aggressive tendency that London is trying to shoehorn in for Birdring. And for this point in particular on Anubis, it's very difficult for a very staggered attack because you don't see the dive happening on the other side of the map. And it's just Birdring fighting for his life. There's no pressure elsewhere. Now the dive comes in, and they actually do decide to dive across the entire map. Now the fight's over. They don't want to push anymore, so they're going to reset. But again, just to highlight the kind of the staggered nature that Philly is actually using Birdring in. The dives aren't necessarily as cohesive as they once were with Prophet and Birdring, and that kind of shows Birdring and the rest of the team not necessarily gelling is what we think. You know, it's great when it works, but when they're actually pressed for time and they're pressed for an advantage, it's very difficult for them to find something that actually sticks, especially with the kind of changing of the paradigm and putting Birdring on Tracer and giving Prophet a little bit more of a creative role and giving him more of the flex position. You know, Junkrat's great here. Genji, again, one of the best points for Genji is point B with the Dragon Blade. Riptire is amazing. We saw it against the Houston Outlaws. Giving Prophet more of the reins here and allowing his hero pool to shine a little bit more means that Birdring and the DPS players on the bench, they have to actually kind of fit into positions that they might not necessarily be comfortable in right now. Birdring and Gesture have yet to gel. They're having a difficult time finding that synergy that Prophet and Gesture have had coming from the GC Busan days. Another clip from the same game, Philly Fusion against the London Spitfire. Comps are fairly standard. Philly's going for the pocket on the Junkrat or the Zenyatta. Both options are fantastic. And London, typical dive, nothing really to talk about there. Very standard, you know, dive a target, kill it. Very high tempo, very, you know, lacking on the neutral game aspect. That's basically what high tempo means. You want to initiate the fight as quickly as possible to kind of get or eliminate the need to kind of set up the fight in kind of pre-fight stage. They want to eliminate that kind of pre-fight stage as much as possible. They just want to dive you, get on top of you, and pummel you into the ground. Now, we don't have a ton of time. London, that is. London does not have a ton of time. They need a lot of progress to get this point kind of secured and force Philly into basically a must-win, or a point cap scenario. And what do you know, Bedosin, being the mini Jonek that he is, he actually caps EQO and actually frags him, which is amazing, which opens up the point for London to be able to take this blitz attack in a much safer scenario. Neptuno actually does go for the res on EQO, which kind of puts him even kind of in an aggressive positioning. He's putting himself a little bit off sides, and Mercy is going to be a big factor here. Again, he does kind of cover that option with the Valk. He pops Valk, which makes his res a little bit shorter and gives him the defensive option of just being able to fly around, right? Now, what you're going to notice here is that Nuss is going to pop Sound Barrier. But there's one person that actually is oddly missing in the Sound Barrier, and it's Birdring, which is strange. Now, what we're going to see is that the dive, most of the dive is going to be positioned on this side, and Birdring is, again, on his lonesome on this side. It's another 5-1 split, and we saw how it worked the first time, so let's see if their luck changes at all. So he dives. The fight has started. He's decided to call for the fight, and where's his team? His team still has not. There's no Winston. There's no Diva. Nobody else has helped him targeting Boombox here. Again, these dives are very staggered. It's showing the kind of naivety and the greenness that this London roster is kind of facing when they're in the rut. They're kind of in the mud. They don't really know what to do. They're changing up the roster. Birdring's on Tracer now. Prophet's being able to flex off onto other heroes, and it's showing. It's the dives aren't as good as what they used to be. We all remember what the London dives were. We all remember what GC Busan's dives were once back in the day during Apex, but the dives are very disjointed. They're not the same anymore. So when we look at London, we can't look at Gesture and Prophet being that dive synergistic combo that's going to abuse your backline and really pop people from all kinds of crazy angles. Now we actually have to look at Gesture and Birdring. So when we look at statistical performances, we again have to take them with a grain of salt, right? Not everything that we see paints the entire picture, but when we look at the matches that I've shown you, the clips, and we compare them to the statistics, we start to see a clear picture on what exactly is happening with Birdring and what issues that London are having, right? So this is actually just his stage 2 performance pulled up on Winston's lab, weighted against stage 2 entirely, just Birdring, every hero. When we look at his stats, there's a few issues, right? There's a few issues with, what he did play in stage 2 and what ends up happening so far, at least in stage 3, leading into week 3, I believe. Now, if we just kind of glance at the stats, his soldier performance was fairly good. Pretty average kills per 10, deaths per 10, fairly low, actually quite good. Ults per 10, time to charge ult, all pretty great. But when we look at his McCree, his Genji, his Widowmaker, and especially what surprisingly enough, his Tracers actually had a fairly poor performance. Really highlighting this Tracer play. His activity in team fights, his overall kind of participation or his kill participation is incredibly low at 24.3%, which is -7 of the average being at 26% roughly. That's fairly low. And if we look at his fight win rate, it kind of echoes that same sentiment that when they ran Birdring on Tracer, they won less than 50% of their fights, which is quite rare to see. But overall, his first, his percentage of his team's deaths, again, fairly low. His kills, usually you're gonna want to average about, roughly 9 kills per 10 minutes. He gets 7. His time to charge ult, it's pretty low, or it's fairly low in the sense that it's low is a good thing because you're doing damage. You want to build your ult quickly, so you want a low time, it's above average, which is nice. His ult efficiency is fabulous, which Loinson's lab calculates that as the percentage of fights won in which his ult was used, subtracted by the percentage of fights won without the ultimate. So it kind of gives you a good idea of how his pulse bombs are, which apparently his pulse bombs are quite good. Comparative, because he's plus 256%, but, you know, take that with a grain of salt. But what's kind of shocking is that his first kills during stage 2 were some of the lowest, actually the worst, in stage 2. He had a 4.5% first kill ratio. And if we look at the kind of overall statistics that have been echoed on broadcast, on multiple articles that I've personally written on Wins' Lab, and many other people have talked about, first kills are everything. First kills are incredibly important. They have been. Even during the Mercy kind of metagame in in stage 1, they were incredibly important. They were undoubtedly one of the most important things in the game, that if you could score the first kill, you were about 70% more likely to win the subsequent team fight. So when you have your Tracer player, who is most of the time going to score you your first kill, not able to do that, there's something very, very wrong with that. And if we look at the amount of time he's played, it's roughly 53 minutes and 35 seconds. It's surprising to look at somebody who has been touted, or who was touted as one of the better Tracer players, if not one of the best Tracer players coming out of the Apex era, or back when he was on Kong Du Panthera in season 2-ish. It is surprising to see such low and such kind of poor performances when we look at the statistics. Now when we jump into stage 3, and again, this is stage 3 so far, coming into week 3, weighted against just stage 3, we see something that's fairly surprising that supports my theory that they're actually shifting where they want to play Birdring. So if we look at stage 2, he's had 53 minutes and 35 seconds playtime in all of stage 2, right? Now in stage 3, Birdring has played 50 minutes on Tracer in stage 3, when we're only coming into week 3. So in 2 weeks, he's played more Tracer, or about the same amount of Tracer, as he has in the entirety of stage 2. His performance is fairly low. It's rough to see his low activity in team fights. His PTK is very, very low. His kills, again, they're overall just kind of poor. I don't really want to sugarcoat it. It's been a very poor performance from him, and you see that when they actually want to go on to other maps, right? So when Ilios is in the map pool, when Oasis, they go to a tiebreaker, that's in the map pool. Junkertown, they don't need to run Birdring as much anymore because they have Hureg. Now, again, there has been a lot of criticism around Hureg, and I don't necessarily think that's unwarranted because he has a very odd hero pool that, again, London are still trying to figure out how to play around. But one thing that they kind of are fairly decent at playing around is his Widow. So if you see him on Ruins, don't be surprised to see him then, obviously you're going to see him the entire map, but don't be surprised to see him on Junkertown, right? When he can play a Tracer that's, not nearly as serviceable as Birdring, but, if they need it, they could play it. But, I don't even think you necessarily need to. When we're coming into the Sombra meta, and Tracer is very, very relevant in this meta as well, you could just keep him on McCree, which is, again, one of his kind of pocket picks. One of Hureg's pocket picks have been kind of the hit scan role, barring the Tracer play. So if you put him on Soldier, the Widow, the McCree, he's going to shine. And with the kind of flex support meta still being very relevant as well, so like having a very strong Lucio player, which they do. I'm sorry, not Lucio. Having a strong Zenyatta player, which they do, you can actually boost Hureg on the Widow or the McCree, and you can pocket Badosin on Zenyatta, which again kind of plays into London's wheelhouse, and it plays up to their roster overall. But it's kind of depressing and kind of scary to see that Birdring on Tracer is having a very rough time adjusting and gelling with this team. Again, it stems from kind of taking two teams and just throwing them together and expecting results and expecting them to perform to a high degree. And I think now in stage 3, they're actually hitting a rough patch in their marriage, if you want to call it that, right? The honeymoon phase is over, and they're starting to face some hardship, and I think it's wearing and taxing on the team. Whether or not that changes, it's hard to say, but I don't necessarily think this is entirely Birdring's fault. I think that overall it's just what happens when you start to pivot off of certain things and you start to shift away from, certain players on certain heroes that have succeeded incredibly well for you in the past. Again, we look at Gesture and Prophet being the kind of two players to revolutionize the kind of duo dive synergy and really kind of show the world how maybe that era of Overwatch was supposed to be played. And we are seeing teams actually replicate that now. When you look at Florida Mayhem, they have the potential to run Awesome Guy and Saya Player. Again, they're on the same page, they can speak the same language, and they can set up dives very efficiently. Similar to what NYXL run. They have two main tanks and they have Sabiobi. Again, all Korean roster, they definitely can speak the same language and they can set up dives very accordingly, which they have done, and they're continuing to do at the top of the leaderboard. So now that they're shifting away from Prophet on Tracer and they're setting Birdring in that position as their kind of Tracer specialist, it's going to take time for them to adjust to Birdring and Gesture, creating those dives. Something that is being kind of talked about in the back channels of the Overwatch community is that the DPS actually are going to be the new callers. They're actually going to be setting up Tracer and Genjis as the callers of the team, because if you think about it, Winston's majority of the time, they have some interesting positioning that they can't always necessarily see the entirety of the fight and set up the dives themselves, whereas the Tracer player or the Genji player have full reign on when they engage, because again, they are the DPS. So if they don't necessarily start the engage, who is? So if they start the engage and they're able to start the engage, the Winston can then follow up, and perhaps the Diva follows up, or maybe even another flanker follows up as well. Maybe a Sombra, maybe a Genji or Tracer, whichever isn't played. So if we kind of keep that in the back of our mind, because I think that's something that's slowly being implemented in some of these teams, maybe Birdring's actually taking a calling role, and that's maybe maybe making his play suffer a little bit. So again, I don't necessarily think that I think it is him underperforming, but I think there's a lot of context to that. I think there's a lot of nuance to why he might be underperforming. So when you look at London, don't hate on Birdring. He's a good boy. He's a good player. At the end of the day, he's a very good player. It's just that he's having a rough time adjusting. Maybe the team's having a rough time adjusting around him on a specific role within that team. Thanks so much for watching the video, guys. I really appreciate it if you sat through the entire thing. If you have anything to comment or discuss with me, please let me know on Twitter or in the comment section down below. You can follow me on Twitter at VOLAMEL. That's Volamel on Twitter. And if you did like the video, please give it a thumbs up and like and subscribe and all that good jazz. So until the next video, take care, guys, and we'll see you later.